So, on the Gospel of John, just some interesting notes. The Gospel of Thomas in verse 24 quotes John 1:9. The Gospel of Thomas quotes in verse 28 John 1:14. The Gospel of Thomas in verse 13 quotes John chapter 4 verse 13 and 15. The Gospel of Thomas in verse 38 quotes John chapter 7 verse 32, 36. The Gospel of Thomas quotes John chapter in verse 77 quotes John chapter 8 verse 12 and 9 to 5 verse 9 to 5, showing you that John was before the Gnostic Gospels. We know the Gnostic Gospels are in the 2nd century mainly, and that means the Gospel of John, if they're quoting from him, is 1st century, showing you that the Gospel of John is an early historical source. We have early manuscripts, principally the Egyptian ones. I don't agree with all of them, but they do verify the early historicity of the Gospel of John. P5, P6, P22, P28, P39, P45, P52, P66, P75, P80, P90, P95, and I have the dates where they were found and everything there, but they were not willing to give me a chance to go into that scholarship. Interesting, the early church fathers, John taught Papias and Polycarp. Ignatius in 315 to 117 also called himself Theophorus, which means God-bearer. Church tradition describes Ignatius as one of the children that Jesus blessed in the Gospel accounts. Ignatius was a student of John and eventually became Bishop of Antioch, Turkey, following the Apostle Peter. He wrote several important letters in the early church. 7 of them survive to this day. These letters are important because they demonstrate the New Testament documents were already written and familiar to the early Christians. Ignatius quoted or alluded to many New Testament books, including Matthew, John, and Luke, several if not all of Paul's letters. So Ignatius, who had a connection with John, quotes the Gospel of John, and that again gives you early historical source material. Irenaeus mentions the Gospel of John. And so what we see is there's a wide spectrum in ancient history of the Gospel of John mentioned. It's also mentioned by the Moratorium fragment. So it's mentioned in different parts of the ancient world, which gives it strong attestation that the Gospel of John was 1st century, because there's a consistent story there, okay, in the mentioning of it by the early church fathers.